I am Evelyn Zumaya, the author of Astral Affairs Rambova, and I want to read my book to you. The transcripts of the 11 seance transmissions from Rudolphvalentino on the astral plane, which Natacharambova titled Revelations, were first published in serialized format by Bernard McFadden in the New York Evening Graphic throughout the spring of 1927. Revelations 1 through 3. Rudolphvalentino's first revelation from the astral plane. Delivered in the Hudnut Chateau in Juanlespin, September 1926. I want to tell you how I first met the Great Spirit, who has helped me to find myself in these new surroundings and who is teaching me to understand the realities of being, the Great Spirit of HPB, Helena Petrovna Blavatsky. Rushing back and forth from New York to you right after my passing, as I did in some unaccountable subconscious way, I found the means of reaching you through George, this channel, this medium, or whatever you may call him. He must have brought me to the particular attention of this teacher, HPB. It was during the time they were taking my body to the West. I was just beginning to feel the loosening of the public's thought, which had been centered upon me and in a way, I believe, holding me close to the earth. But as newspaper notoriety began to die down and my remains were being piloted to their earthly resting place, I began to feel more alone. The moment the flattering effect of the public's attention was removed, I realized how separated from all these people I was, so far as sight and sound were concerned. I felt very wretched and lonely. As you well know, Natasha, I have always been easily touched by praise and flattery. The struggles I had gone through and the obstacles I had overcome made the pleasures of public attention all the greater. But now I stood alone. There was no one to praise me. I began to feel bitter that I had been cut off in the very height of my activity. I'm afraid I valued myself pretty highly, for I could not see how things could go on without me. I can laugh about it now, but it seemed a real misfortune to me then. There was no one to talk to about it, and I wandered up and down Broadway. It seemed just as real to me then as it had before, but no one took any notice of me. I could hardly comprehend that they could not see me. I was so real, and they were so real, that it made the realization of my change very difficult. I grew tired of dodging out of the way of hurrying people who seemed determined to run into me. Once I jolted against a woman who headed straight into me, and she shuddered and grasped her companion's arm, saying, "My, what a cold wind just struck me." This made me furious. So death had turned me into a cold wind. I would not have it so. I rushed up to a group of actors on the corner of 47th Street and Broadway, near the Palace Theater. I seized one of the men by the arm and shouted, "I am Rudolphvalentino." But he paid no attention and went on laughing and talking. I felt so helpless and useless, and yes, I felt dead, too. At that moment I did not believe in God. How could God, who let me succeed in my earth life, be so unjust as to let me fail now? The injustice of it drove me nearly frantic. Something was very wrong. Here I was, perfectly strong and well, only having stepped out of my physical body, not dead but full force and life. I was standing right on the very corner I had stood on hundreds of times before, and yet not a soul could understand that I was there. Natasha, I do not believe I ever have loved people or yearned for their companionship so much as at that moment. Life seemed so preposterous. It was incredible to me that I, who had been so admired before, was now so absolutely shut out. Oh, I tell you, life seemed cruel. And then it dawned upon me that I was wrong. These people did not mean to be cruel. They were just as warm-hearted and friendly as I, but they did not know. They had never been told the truth. They were only acting in accordance with the way in which they had been taught. Then I realized that fault was not theirs. Whose was it? Their parents? Was it the fault of society at large? No, that was not it. At last the idea struck me. Who taught society the truths of life? The churches. They were the ones that were at fault. What was the matter with them? With all of their preaching about the rewards of the next life and eternal salvation and all of the rest of it, of what avail was it if it left me standing there on Broadway being refused recognition? I felt anything but kindly towards the churches. Here I was, dead to the world, and all because the churches had inbred in people's minds the false idea that spirits cannot reach back through the veil. My own church, the Roman Catholic, it understood these facts. The priest who gave me the last sacraments knew it would give my soul a peaceful passing, and it did. But what sacrament could continue to give you peace when you frantically banged on the doors of people's consciousness, and yet not a single door would open? I tell you, Natasha, it is all wrong. There will never be real peace and happiness on earth until the truth of life and life everlasting is made clear to people. The churches have not been able to wipe out crime and injustice, but the truths of life and life's positive and active continuance will wipe them out. For people will then understand why they were led to do wrong. They will realize the utter futility of wrong. They will see how useless it is to fool themselves and other people, for spirit sees all. Oh, the thoughts that coursed through my consciousness as I stood on that street corner. I wept with grief and raged with indignation, but all to no avail. Then suddenly I thought of you, and of the cablegrams you sent me while I lay so ill. I thought of Muzzy's and Uncle Dickie's messages, and suddenly someone touched me by the arm. I turned and looked. A heavily built woman with kind eyes was standing beside me. I shall never forget her voice, so low and so reassuring, but the vehemency of her language nearly bowled me over. Hell, fire, and damnation, she said, so this is how the churches have knocked the wind out of you. Come, there's nothing the matter with the dear old churches, except that they are bat blind. What you need is a friend, albeit I am HPB. Natasha, I didn't know what to say. I was so surprised. And the initials HPB meant nothing to me. I did not remember ever having heard them before. But this strange being only laughed and said, "Come." I lost consciousness for how long I did not know, but suddenly I awoke and found myself standing in the big stone hall of Uncle Dickie's chateau. It was night, and the big chandelier on the stairs was lit. HPB stood at the top of the stairs and beckoned. I went up where so often I had gone in my earth life. She led me into Muzzy's room, and there I saw you and Muzzy sitting. George was sleeping, as I thought, in a big easy chair. "He is in a trance," said HPB. "Now you will be able to speak to your loved ones." That, Natasha dearest, is how I first came to communicate with you, and that is how I came into contact with HPB. Sometime after this, she talked to me about reincarnation and theosophy. She laughed and said she would enjoy seeing certain theosophists turn up their noses at the idea of her bothering with the ghost of a dead motion picture actor. But she added, if theosophy does not teach love and assistance to every living thing in creation, what in thundering blazes does it teach? This sounded pretty sensible to me, and I said so. But of course, I do not know much about theosophy or theosophists. When I asked HPB what theosophy meant, she said, "Theosophy is life and how to live it." That silenced me pretty thoroughly, for it seemed like a rather large order. The force is weakening. I must leave. Coming again soon. And good night. The second revelation, received in Juanlespin, September 1926. I cannot now view things in the same old way. Rushing to you after my passing and finding this means of reaching you through George brought me, as I have told you, to the attention of HPB, as all seemed to call her. What a woman! At first I was afraid of her. The light, the radiance, I suppose I should call it, almost blinded me. Her eyes made me uncomfortable. They seemed to search out my worst points. And all this happened right in Muzzie's room, where you were sitting. George in a trance, and I with others waiting my turn to speak. HPB stared at me so hard, and her light grew so dazzling, whitish gold. It seemed that I became embarrassed, and was about to turn away when a flash of beautiful green, I think ray would be a better word, a ray of clear, bright green, shot from her towards me, and I heard her voice, so soft and low, calling me Rudy and little brother. Somehow all embarrassment left me, and I went at once to her. She put her arms around me and said, "Well, child, you have left that," and pointed to the walls of Muzzie's room. A change seemed to have come to my sight, for I saw that the walls, the ceiling, the floor, and the furniture all gave off a kind of light, but a light that was a drab and dull sort of putty green and brown. I was able to see straight through the walls of the chateau, and to look out into the night. The night did not seem so dark to me as it used to when I was still in my body. It seemed filled with a luminous glow that somehow lit up between the particles of darkness. This is difficult to express to you. I can hardly find words to describe the new sights and sensations. I could see the trees and the terraces and the Mediterranean beyond. All of these things gave off their own kind of light, but so dull and pale in color. You know how much I have always loved bright colors. You used to say it was the Italian blood in me. This strange dullness puzzled me. HPB must have read my mind, for she said, "You are seeing the dullness of the earth plane in the pale reflection of loftier and more brilliant spheres." All fear left me. I began to love this strange woman. Suddenly, as I looked at her, I saw she became double, or sort of turned into two personalities. Maybe that is not the best way to express it. But at any rate, she appeared in two bodies at the same time. One stood a little behind the other. The one I had seen first was young-looking and very beautiful, so beautiful as to be awe-inspiring. The other was a huge, bulky form, dressed in a shawl and a red petticoat, with a scarf over her head, showing her hair, which looked rather crinkly. But the eyes were the same in both, brilliant, piercing, and very kind. She must have read my mind again, for I was amazed. The beautiful, slender, young figure turned and pointed to the bulky, aged one, and her voice said, "That is the HPB that the Earth people remember, but I am the HPB of now." Then behind the bulky form appeared many forms, a long line with one behind the other, and yet seeming to dovetail or merge with each other in an inexplicable way. HPB laughed and spoke. "Those are my former selves. A damned lot of trouble they have made for me, too. But now they are all chained together and come and go as I ordered them, like this." She waved her arm in a sweeping gesture, and instantly all these forms were swept into, what shall I say, well, out of sight. The one that had stood right back of the bulky form had been a man, dark-skinned, like a Hindu. "Da, yes, yes," she said, turning in a kind of flash upon me. "That was the shell of the body of the man through which my spirit expressed itself before I came to earth as the old lady." Ever since that time, Natasha, that meeting with Muzzie, you, and George, HPB has helped me. Sometimes she has sworn at me soundly, and I have been alarmed that perhaps she would leave me, but always at the end of her scolding, her smile has reassured me. After seeing her former selves appear and disappear in this fascinating manner, I was anxious to see my own former selves and asked her how to do it. But I was nearly knocked over by the gale of words she launched at me. Stupid, fool, blind pig, and other choice things, and winding up by saying, "Poor, ignorant darling. Can a baby run and leap before it has learned to creep and walk?" So that finished me on that subject for some time to come. There are so many things to learn that it is confusing at times. I have to let go, it seems, of the old way of looking at things. In the earth world, I think I had better say, look only at the outward appearance of people and things and events. We can't help that because we only see the outside. But here we see the outside and the inside as well. It is really very interesting, for the inside lying within the outer shell is always more bright and more active than the outside. It makes me think of the hidden fires of Vesuvius. In this way, when I now look at Earth people, I see through the body and surface personality and look right at the real self inside. Sometimes this is duller, even more than the body. And again, it is more brilliant and beautiful. The visual aspect of things I have learned and believe I understand pretty well, but the interpretation of them is still something beyond my grasp. But I will learn. HPB says so. And you know, Natasha, that I always did accomplish what I set out to do, even if it did take some time. It is strange, but since I am in this new plane of life, I do not feel hurried or rushed anymore. I used to always feel when I wanted to do something that I had to hurry up and that there might not be time enough. But here it is different. Here I seem to know somehow that there will be time enough and that all I need to do is to go steadily ahead. Once in a while, when I am with you or Muzzy, I feel a little anxious over the results. Then the voice of HPB calls down to me from somewhere, "Steady, darling, steady." Her voice often sounds close to my ear, even when my eyes do not see her, nor my senses feel her presence. Where is she that she is able to know what I am doing and to answer my thoughts when she is invisible? Another thing for me to learn in time. This invisible guidance does not frighten me now. You remember the impressions I used to get so often, the thoughts that people were thinking of me, and how it used to startle me, but no more. The most unusual occurrences now seem perfectly usual. The weirdest happenings now seem natural. So much love I have never seen before. Everyone seems to beam with it. Caruso, whom as you remember I always admire so, comes to me or I go to him. When I asked him about it, he laughed and said, "Well, mio figlio, what does it matter? Are we not together?" He does not look just as he used to, either. He looks more like his music sounded, if you can imagine what I mean. You see, there do not seem to be the right kind of words to tell these things with understanding. But I'm doing the best I can and trust to you, your own keen insight. You used to get thoughts quickly. I hope you do now. So this is what people call being dead. Natasha, they don't know what they're talking about. They are so cramped up in their little bodies, so wound up in their own ideas of self-sufficiency, so looking down. How different the real truth is. Why don't the churches tell us the truth? Why don't the Jesuit fathers explain the loveliness of life? They know all about it, but they seem to be afraid to come right out with it. I have such a wonderful sense of freedom now, and no fear. I feel as if I could accomplish anything, if I could just know how to go about it. Well, of course, people on Earth feel that way too, but there they always have this sense of great obstacles. I know I only have to be shown the way and then start out to accomplish it. On account of this, I am sure I will be able to do good work in a while. If I learn to be a good actor when on Earth, why can't I be a good helper after I learn? I will. I do not walk up and down Broadway any more. There's no use in it. Nobody knows I'm there, and it is too dull for me to be happier there. I sometimes find myself in theaters where my pictures are still being shown, but somehow they do not seem as real to me as they used to. I do not feel so stirred when an audience is moved by my acting or the acting of others. Something about the earth is growing fainter. The world seems to be fading out of my life picture. People who have not in some way been close to me, or have not really loved me, are now blurred and dim and indistinct to my consciousness. And still I love the earth and its people. I think my ties with the earth are gradually being severed. I cannot hold the force any longer. Good night, Natasha dear. Do not forget me. Give my love to Muzzy, Uncle Dickie, and Aunt Teresa. I feel that all will be well with Aunt Teresa. She was like Gabriella, my own dear mother, and if she comforted me, why should I not provide for her earthly comfort? Who has the right to change my mind after I have gone? I did what I did with my earthly earnings, as I felt it to be the fairest way. Alberto, Maria, and Auntie were the nearest to me. They were my little family. Why should they not share and share alike? I hope God will let my way be seen to be the fair way. Good night. I shall come again. The Third Revelation. Juanlespin, September 1926. Well, I was very ill, but before it was known for certain that I was to pass over, I suddenly saw Jenny. I was so surprised that I think I called out her name. It was only for a moment that I saw her. She stood before me in a glow of rose-colored light. She looked at me and smiled, just as she used to in her Earth days when she knew I needed encouragement. She held out her arms. Her smiles seemed to voice the idea, "Do not worry." I did not hear her speak, and this vision was all over in a second. But I knew then, Natasha, that I was to go. Deep inside, I felt my earthly days to be over. It frightened me. I did not want to go. I had a strange sensation, as of sinking out of everything. The world seemed dearer and brighter than ever it had before. I thought of my work and how I loved it. I thought of my home, of my things, and of my pets. Rapidly, one thought after another rushed in a tumult in my brain. The thought of cars, travel, yachts, clothes, and money. All these material things seemed doubly valuable to me now. The feeling that suddenly these things were about to be swept away from me, or I away from them, appalled me. My body screamed, deadly heavy, and at the same time something within me felt very light, as if I was about to be lifted. Time began to seem very important. Something unknown seemed looming up before me. There was a dreadful sense of immensity all around me, which startled my very soul. I began to think of hundreds of things I had intended to do, important things, trivial things, even letters that I had intended to write swept across my mind. But the fleeting, though intensely clear vision of Jenny had in some way pushed the power to accomplish these desires far, far away from me. Her strange, beautiful smile, her outstretched arms, and the unearthly light around her haunted me. All this time there was a rumbling sound around me and a jolting sensation, as of a moving vehicle. I'm not sure, but it seemed to me that I heard George Ullman's voice. Dear George Ullman. The thought of people crowded into my mind. Faces, faces, faces. Faces of those I had seen but a few days before, and the faces of people I had known long ago in the past. I thought of my fellow cheery workers, of people that relied upon me for help, people of all sorts that ran after me for one thing or another. Maria's face, Alberto's, Auda's, Aunt Teresa's, Shank's, Muzzy, and yours. Many, many memories of my father and my mother. Childhood, Italy, school, my first journey to America, and my first papers of citizenship. The rush of thoughts drowned my pain. Even the most ridiculous experiences, yet also vivid, surged through my memory. Follies, pleasures, griefs, everything I had ever done seemed to come from somewhere and arise to the surface. It made me dizzy. I lost consciousness. When I came to, the operation had been performed. Everybody smiled encouragingly at me. I had to keep quiet, although I felt as if I had so much to say, so much. But all through those last days, although at times I felt stronger, a weight of dread lay on my heart. I felt that if I could only get up and begin doing many things I had neglected, I might lose this dread. Of course they would not let me get up. Your messages were clear and comforted me. I had a remarkable feeling that I might see you again, that at any moment you might walk into the room. HPB has since told me that this was because I was soon to go to you instead. Then I had difficulty breathing, and I knew that all was drawing to an end. I was dreadfully frightened. It was too sudden for me to understand. I don't believe I was actually afraid to die, Natasha. I began to know then that I was changing. I could feel it taking place in my body and my mind. Something seemed to be dropping away. There was at times a straining sensation, as if some part of my being were tearing itself loose. I thought of what would happen to my body afterwards, funeral, cremation, and the ground. This gave me a sense of horror. Then the priest came. He seemed like a light in the dark. I turned to him with all my fear, my horror, and my uncertainty. My childhood again emerged. Dim cathedral aisles swam before my eyes, the last sacrament. After the simple ceremony was over, I felt already away from the earth. My mental attitude was changed. The church, like a strong and friendly hand, was holding me. I would not be alone. Fear left me. Faces around me grew dim. Silence, darkness, unconsciousness. I do not know how long this lasted. Just as if awakening from a long, deep sleep, I opened my eyes, experiencing at the same moment a feeling as of being rapidly drawn upward, then wonderful bluish light, then Blackfeather, Jenny, and Gabriella, my mother. I was dead. I was alive. This, Natasha, is the remembrance of my passing.